look at Luke 24, verses 10 through 11.
Now they were Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James. Also the other women with them were telling these things to the apostles. But these words appeared to them as nonsense, and they would not believe them. Wait, Rick, here's another disconnect.
Yes.
Why didn't they believe the women and the angel's message? What was their disconnect?
Well, first of all, they're hiding. Secondly, they have been utterly traumatized. You're following Jesus, and all of a sudden, late at night, Judas shows up with a mob, takes him prisoner for what? No reason. Through the night, he goes through trials, he's whipped, he's questioned, and then he's on trial before Pilate. And then before you know it, he's hanging on the cross and he's writhing in pain and he's up there for 6 hours and then he dies and he's buried. And you're going, what just happened? So to say, oh, he's risen, everything's great. It's like, wait, I can't even begin to get my head around all of the trauma that I was dealing with. And that's a very human thing. We can say, well, the answer is here, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with what I'm dealing with. So I think that the trauma was just overwhelming. Now, here's the thing. Jesus knew that they weren't going to be able to respond. So he's always on it. He's always ahead of the curve. He wouldn't miss a moment, as he already knew they're going to doubt because he told them that they would. So the 2 verses later in Luke, just 2 verses later, Jesus will address this issue himself. And boy, when we go through this, this is a beautiful introduction into seeing the risen Lord in a whole different way. This is on the road to Emmaus. Let's look at Luke 24, 13 to 15. And Jonathan, this is all on the same day.
And behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them.
Okay, so they're about their business, trying to figure out their trauma. They're taking a 7 mile walk to Emmaus, and this guy shows up. Well, so they're engaged in this very, very fervent discussion. I'm sure it's very passionate about trying to figure out what happened. What did you hear? And this is what I heard, and I don't understand. And what are we going to do? And how do we process this? And they're going through. They're trying to comprehend their circumstances. And Jesus appeared to show them exactly the answers that they were seeking. This next verse is very significant. Luke 24:16.
But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. The word prevented here means they were held back from recognizing Jesus.
So this is important because what's about to happen is they don't see him as Jesus, they see him as a stranger. This becomes the setting the table for showing them the Messiah, showing them the risen Lord in a whole different way than they would have been able to comprehend if they could recognize him right up front. So let's see how Jesus unfolds this. Now, Jesus obviously is responsible for keeping their eyes from recognizing him. So let's go to the next verse, Luke 24:17.
And he, Jesus, said to them, "What are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you are walking?" And they stood still, looking sad. This word sad means a gloomy or mournful countenance.
And it's interesting. So they've got this mournful sense to them, and they stopped dead in their tracks. Jesus asked them, "So what are you talking about?" And they just stop. And they've got this overwhelming sadness, and they want to talk with this stranger. Jesus knew their state of mind. He knew what it would be. Okay? Imagine the joy in the heart of Jesus as at appearing to these faithful followers and preparing to slowly and systematically reveal all that he had promised them before his crucifixion. They don't know who he is. They have no idea. So what he does is he comes up and he asks a question. So what are you talking about? This begins to open the door. Let's go to Luke 24:18.
And one of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days?
So, like, sir, where have you been? You know, have you not talked to anybody in the last several days? And it's interesting. This Cleopas, Adam Clark tells us that this Cleopas is the same as Alphaeus, father of the Apostle James. So there's a very strong connection here, discipleship wise. As a matter of fact, and when we look at John, let's take a detour for a moment. Let's look at John 19:25 to see some of that connection unfold.
Therefore, the soldiers did these things, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. Think of all that Cleopas would have known about the crucifixion due to his wife being at the cross.
She was at the cross. She was there. And so he would have been filled in on the things that he himself didn't see. So Cleopas is just spilling all of this now. He says, are you the only one who doesn't know what's going on?" So Cleopas's response to Jesus showed the social and political magnitude of the crucifixion. Everybody knew about it. There was no social media, but there was personal media. Everybody knew what was happening. And so Jesus provokes it further. Let's go to Luke 24:19 through 24.
And he, Jesus, said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a mighty prophet in deed and word and in the sight of God and all the people."
So you have this question. So Jesus asks another question. First, it's, so what are you talking about? Like, well, the things with Jesus, the Nazarene. Well, what things? Jesus is pulling it out of them. He's provoking them. He's opened the door to listen by doing what he had given these the privilege of not, and by doing that, he'd given these the privilege of not only being heard, but of hearing themselves express what was in their hearts and minds. And Jonathan, that's an important principle. He gives them the opportunity to tell their story. But in telling their story, you're not only telling it to the person who's listening, but you're saying it out loud and you're hearing yourself say it. Both of those things are very important, and that's what Jesus is drawing out of them. This would be a powerful basis for Jesus to expand their hearts and minds to an entirely new level.